Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to today's Accounting Technology Lab. We want to talk to you about the Strategic Cryptocurrency Reserve, the new announcement and executive order creating the US Digital Asset Stockpile. Now, Brian and I have had the good fortune of teaching you about cryptocurrency and smart contracts and blockchain in prior accounting technology labs. Today's episode is not to teach you those things, but to give you a little bit of background on what's going on. Now, the day that we're recording this episode, there is a national summit on cryptocurrency occurring, and the announcement on the cryptocurrency executive order was just yesterday. But to lay out some of the background on this, I just want to point out that first we have a AI and crypto czar, David Sachs, who was involved with PayPal initially. And he also went on to create his own venture capital fund, Craft Ventures. So he's kind of in play here, if you will. And we know that the different coins that are going to be held in the strategic reserve include Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as three other lessers that Brian will talk to you about in just a minute. Ripple XRP, which has a primary mission of replacing the international currency transfers with the SWIFT capabilities today, Solana and Cardano. Now, those are the five basic strategic reserves, if you will. Now, you have to think for a minute, what's it really mean to have a strategic reserve? Well, a strategic reserve is a critical resource that can be released at times of crisis or supply disruptions. So you might know of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the world's largest supply of emergency crude oil, which was created by an act of Congress in 1975 after the 73-74 Arab oil embargo, which I recall clearly at the time, and the gas lines and all the stuff like that.
It's not strategic helium reserve we have that was created when we needed helium for nuclear weapons and now is used to buoy not cryptocurrency, but quantum computing by providing a resource for accumulating that helium, which only is created when uranium decays. So it floats out into space. So when you let that balloon go, it ain't coming back.
Exactly. And, Canada, of course, has the world's only strategic reserve of maple syrup, and China has strategic reserves of metals, grains, and even pork products. So strategic reserves are kind of about those types of things. Now, what we know has been happening is through civil and through criminal proceedings, the cryptocurrency bitcoins have been accumulated. And it's a pretty stunning amount of crypto that has been impounded, I think is the right word, 198,109 Bitcoin, which at today's valuation is about 18.5 billion. And we know that much of this cryptocurrency has been sold off without any oversight. The estimated losses to U.S. taxpayers are around 17 billion, according to some of the reports that Brian and I researched for today's episode. Now, again, we're not trying to say this is great, this is bad. We're trying to make you aware as our listeners of some of the goings on with this. So I've done kind of a long setup here, and I'd like Brian to spend a moment reminding you of the five cryptocurrencies and their attributes, because I think it's wise that you understand Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus XRP versus Solana versus Cardano and so forth. I think that's important, number one. And number two, just the whole background on that. Now, point of disclosure, Brian and I have been around cryptocurrency and we think smart contracts are a great thing, and we've been proponents of this for quite some time. But we've also kind of considered the fiat currency, fiat positioning of stablecoin that are backed by a fiat currency, because much of this cryptocurrency has no monetary backing behind it, which obviously has some risk. And we've had many of you as accountants tell us we're on drugs when we're talking about this stuff. You guys are just tech guys. You don't understand real assets. I don't know about any of that, but I can tell you, having now followed this for over 15 years personally and having taught a lot of courses on this, I kind of get it, I think. And I would just suggest a little bit further that Brian and I also have attended every AICPA blockchain and cryptocurrency event that's been held to date. Now, way too much setup, but Brian, can you just give our listeners a little bit of background on these five critical cryptocurrencies of Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Ripple XRP is the way I usually call that one, Solana, and Cardano?
Okay, so these are all A-list cryptocurrencies. They're all in the I think they're in the top 10, all of them. And so these are the ones that again President Trump has proposed to create a stockpile of. Now remember the problem with some of these currencies is that with crypto generally is that we don't follow the know your customer rules. And so it makes it a violation of banking regulations and sometimes borderline money laundering when people do transactions in this. And it can violate sanctions and all kinds of things like this. We've heard that, for example, a lot of rogue regimes like Iran and North Korea have actually been going out and making purchases and getting the hard currency they need to operate off of their ransomware work, and then getting paid in these cryptocurrencies. So
And in fact, Brian, your point there is spot on, because one of the concerns and the reason we slowed down our discussion on this was so much of crypto is being used for criminal purposes and involved so much in ransomware attacks. Of course, you have been writing, true tech crimes, and you've got all sorts of illustrations of that. But we also know, for example, that theft has been happening on cryptocurrencies. The most recent one in the last few weeks was 1.5 billion of crypto stolen. And, I just can't kind of keep watching these. But I also know that there are lawsuits like that against Justin Sun, where he was misrepresenting crypto and wound up with a lawsuit on that.
but I think we've really turned a corner here. I think this is the first step in the legitimization of crypto in financial services. And I don't know, Congress is going to have to make a lot of decisions on this, and we don't know what they're going to do. But because I will tell you that as recently as a year ago, I saw some moves that were made against some of the cryptocurrencies, and it looked like the banking industry was trying to crush it. Okay, because honestly, cryptocurrencies are an existential threat to against the especially if we had a central bank digital currency, which would be like a US dollar backed cryptocurrency that's on the blockchain. That would mean that you wouldn't need to pay your bank for running an account for you. Okay. And so that's gonna make things a little more complicated. Okay. So I think this is the baby step into legitimizing both blockchain technology as well as crypto as a traditional financial service. But you can see the all of these have been founded since 2009. The first one, of course, Bitcoin, founded by somebody under a pseudonym, Satoshi Nakamoto, and it's not been disclosed who that is. So it's still unknown, and that person still has huge amounts of Bitcoin holdings. We have Ripple Labs. Ripple actually had a big SEC lawsuit against them years back, and again, it's the concern here is that again we've got three groups that could regulate any kind of financial asset. There's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission that deals primarily with derivatives. There's the banking regulators, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency that deals with currency, and then there's the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the problem that we've had is we've had those three that have not really nobody's really warmed up to this and said, hey, I'll regulate it, I'll take it. They've all taken issue with different cryptocurrencies over different things. And I think some of that, honestly, is the rent-seeking behavior from the existing market participants that want to protect their turf. But I think some of it, too, is legitimate concerns about the anonymity associated with some of these things. So we've got, again, Solana. There's some concerns over how decentralized it is. Cardano is considered to be regulatory friendly. And again, Ethereum is the one that's the most interesting in my mind because it is both more efficient from a power usage standpoint, and it can be used not only to exchange value but also to do smart contracts. And so there, it's used a lot in DeFi and NFTs. Now, I've got listed here some strengths and weaknesses for each one. And again, I hope you will go out to our, if you're listening to this on the on a audio only, I hope you'll go and look at the tables that we have on the article at cpapracticeadvisor.com/podcast. Because what I think you're going to see here is that, Bitcoin is the most popular one. It's got the largest market cap by a bunch, but it also is the most decentralized. It has the high fees, it's energy intensive, the transactions are the slowest, and it uses a consensus mechanism, or a consensus is really the way you do the bookkeeping on the ledger, and the consensus mechanism it uses is called proof of work. Now, state of New York, many other states that are concerned about climate change have actually taken a stand against Bitcoin mining. That is doing this proof of work bookkeeping for the blockchain because it is so inefficient, because it's run almost like a real-time auction in real time. And so what happens is you end up doing 20, 50, 100 times as much calculation as actually needs to happen so that everybody becomes happy. And so this proof of work mechanism is a problem. As we look at the others, again, the others generally are a little bit faster than Bitcoin. Some of the weaknesses include some network congestion issues with Solana, some slower development with Cardano. With Ethereum, when the price of it gets up, the smart contracts become more expensive, because in Ethereum you have ether and gas that are two different pieces with it. And Ethereum not only lets you exchange value, it also lets you buy computing power to execute smart contracts. That's called, again, this fuel is called gas. And so dealing with those issues is a significant challenge. So Bitcoin is here, I think, generally because it's the 1.7 billion out of the about, I think it's 3 billion currently in market cap as we're recording this in early March of 2025, associated with crypto. But it uses also the least efficient algorithm of proof of work. And so I think people are going to use that because it has the largest market cap. On the other hand, the other four are much more interesting in the long term because they don't have that proof of work consensus mechanism. And what that means is that you only do the calculation once, and you do it by a trusted party, as opposed to everybody calculating everything independently all the time, which is incredibly inefficient from a power and a cost perspective.
Yeah, so
Now,
Brian, just a couple of other social comments on this. Right now, most crypto values seem to fluctuate in line with Bitcoin. And I think we're going to have to see more decoupling of the values of the different cryptos for them to have more meaning. Your point and observation, by the way, I think is also spot on. This legitimacy, so Swift could get replaced with XRP. So this could be really traded as an asset. And, there was a whole bunch of contention around SEC regulations, and I don't know how to predict the future on that. But you and I have talked on this as far back as 6 years ago, because you'll remember in, Trump presidency one, President Trump said, quote, Bitcoin is not money, and it is highly volatile and based on thin air. That's his direct quote from 2019. And he went on to say, we have only one real currency in the USA, and it's stronger than ever. It's the United States dollar. Well, things have changed since then. And, knowing that crypto is of high interest to a number of people involved with the administration this time. It is clear that this is finally going to get traction, is another way that I would think about this. And so, knowing the transaction speeds, and for again, for our listeners only, we encourage you to get to the video version of this. But Bitcoin takes about 10 minutes a block to process right now, and there's a limitation of 21 million Bitcoins. And today, you heard the physical number. The goal is to get to 1 million Bitcoins in the strategic reserve. And that would be 5% of the 21 million Bitcoins out there. Now, XRP has about a 3 to 5 second processing time. That's good enough to do a wire transfer, a swift transfer, if you would. And of course, Solana very quick at 400 milliseconds, Cardano much slower at 20 seconds, and Ethereum at 12 to 15
Yeah.
seconds for
So
processing
realistically here,
speed.
Solana could replace your MasterCard, Visa, credit card networks pretty easily. And then you look at XRP, and that's going to replace your Swift and your wire transfers potentially. And it's not going to. I'm saying it potentially could. Those networks could be repurposed to do this. Now, remember, these are networks and these are applications that run in the background that do all the accounting on this. And so this is really a huge step into the void of automation. In that, if you put it, unlike your bank, where if you put in the wrong bank account when you're doing a transfer, you can recall that transaction. When you put in a wrong account in here, if it goes out into the ether into an account that doesn't exist, well, guess what? It's just gone. And it's not never coming back. And so it's this, the thing to understand here is that although there is some potential for interesting things to happen here, um, realistically, I think because it's so not fault tolerant. It's so intolerant of errors. I think realistically, the institutions are going to be connecting up with these things more as time goes on, and not as much direct individuals, just because you know the the cost of mistakes is just unforgiving.
And
Now we
Brian,
look,
I think our listeners both know about us. Obviously, a point of disclosure, I sit on the board of directors of a bank core processing system. Obviously, your wife is a commercial lender. And so, I mean, we have deep ties to banking. And this idea that Solana could replace credit cards, which, by the way, is absolutely possible, ACH entries, if you would, and XRP doing Swift entries, all of a sudden the banking mechanisms and the controls around that are quite different. Now, just as kind of a point of reference, also, Senator Cynthia Lummis, who is out of Wyoming, and you and I have talked about the Wyoming initiatives on
yeah,
cryptocurrency. They were,
yeah,
you
and
know,
the state chartered banks that were the first that could hold assets in trust.
yeah. So, basically, I want to call out that, they are people that are involved with this think that cryptocurrency is the way to go. And obviously, Loomis has been promoting that in her own state. But I want to point out that right now, lawmakers in 24 U.S. states have introduced led their own legislation at the state level to create their own Bitcoin stockpiles. And those measures have failed in 4 states, including Loomis's own Wyoming. Now, again, I'm not trying to sound political on this, but there is some sort of movement here that as accountants, you need to be quite aware of. And of course, we're we haven't even mentioned the reporting required on tax forms, which we have talked about in prior accounting technology labs. So this know your customer, the value of the crypto, the transactions, the anonymity, if you will, that is behind these transactions. There's so many factors that will begin coming out as all of this unfolds over the next little while. Now, again, we would encourage you to consider some of your own research on this or watching it. But again, quote from President Trump, for a skeptic who said a few years ago that Bitcoin was, quote, seems like it's a scam has turned into, well, the crypto president now has turned in ways that can help both the crypto industry and could enrich himself and his family. Obviously, you've got the Trump coin and so forth. So, Brian, one other thing that I know we talked about before going to recording was just talking about the valuation of these different coins that are in the market. And you typically track that, and you have taught me this through the years. So, could you speak to some of the current valuations that are out there as
Sure.
of the day of this recording? And remember,
Yeah,
you've got to
so
look at these every day.
so as of the day of, yeah, and remember that these, one of the problems with using most of these that a strategic crypto reserve could take care of is we could effectively have the government making a market in these and the Fed or some other regulator, making the prices more stable. The problem right now with most of these is that, Bitcoin, the most stable, the price can still vary 20% in a single day. And that movement is not consistent with anything that's a financial asset. Okay. You can't bet on that and go there. The current, this website is coinmarketcap.com. It's kind of I think of it as the Wall Street Journal or the CBS Money Line or whatever, the money website that tracks crypto the best. Global market is three trillion dollars today. It's off 14 bips from yesterday. And then it lists out the coins by market cap. And so what I want you to see is that on the day we're doing this, where we have a roughly $3 trillion market cap, associated with all of the cryptocurrencies. Notice that 1.75 trillion of that roughly is Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin is still the 800-pound gorilla by a bunch. But notice then Ethereum right after it has a market cap of all outstanding coins of 266 million. Then XRP or Ripple, despite their issues that they've had going back and forth with the SEC over the years, it still has a market cap of now $145 billion. We then have Tether. We have Tether and we have USDC. Tether is number 4, USDC is number 7. Those are not in the strategic crypto reserve, but those are what we call stable coins. And they have assets or derivatives backing them that cause them to have a market cap, or excuse me, a unit cost that is roughly equivalent to $1, very similar to a digital money market fund. Now, I don't know anything about BNB, so I can't speak to it. But then we have Solana as the next one. That's the one again we mentioned that could go through and actually be used to replace the. I guess we could use Solana to
ACH and
replace
credit cards. Yeah.
ACH and credit cards. Yeah, yeah. We then have Cardano in here, and then notice we didn't make it all the way down to Dogecoin, and I'm sure Elon is very upset about that. But I'm sure that if Dogecoin had ended up in the strategic crypto reserve, Elon would have had all kinds of new problems to deal with. So,
Yeah, I
anyway,
hadn't even considered that, Brian. So
yeah,
you're spot on because, when you look at what and again, I'm not trying to sound political on this, but the PayPal mafia, the people that are involved in PayPal have done some good things and some bad things along the way. One other thing that, you've heard me say through the years is follow the money. You know the movie, you know the reference, follow the money. But I think it's also uh, insightful to recognize in the past election cycle that Kamala Harris got 11 million from Chris Larson, the Ripple co-founder, that Vinod Khosla gave 1 million to that same campaign. He's the Coinbase voice. I'll get it out. Coinbase backer. You got Reid Hoffman, another Coinbase investor that put another 250,000 in Kamala's campaign. And of course, President Trump received from Howard Lutnick 6.4 million, who is a Bitcoin and Tether advocate. Of course, you got the Winklevoss twins that run the Gemini exchange that put in 2 million, and Jesse Powell, who does Kraken, who put in almost 1 million, and Bijan Tehrani, Stakes co-founder, put in almost 1 million, and JP Richardson of Exodus Crypto Wallet put in 1 million, and Gary Cardone put in 1 million. And those are
so
just the reported contribution campaigns from the federal reporting. And I'm sure there's more. But the thing is, I just say follow the money. And, as you watch crypto, it's going to be hard to follow the money because of the anonymity, even if you're using the blockchain explorers.
Yeah, I mean, you can see, yeah, the problem is you with all of these, you can see every transaction, but you don't know who it is that has that account. And so it's much more difficult. Well, in many ways, it's easier for the feds to figure out who's doing things as opposed to cash transactions. On the other hand, it's harder because you don't know who's who, and effectively there's this I guess laundering that can be done where you basically execute a whole bunch of sales to new wallets to effectively cleanse the Bitcoin. So it's hard to see that it came from this event.
Yeah. And,
Lot of interesting things going on here.
yeah, and we did talk about that too, because we also know that Cyprus was clearing an awful lot of crypto. And, I have not been a fan of dark money at any political level, but we also know that the Fair Shake PAC put in 200 million in these campaigns, that the Future Forward PAC put in 400 million, and several others put in over 300 million. So we know that each campaign put in, $1 billion plus this past cycle. And it turns out it looks like the majority of the contributions were crypto if you start adding the numbers up. So, again, I'm not trying to rehash or any of that stuff. It's just very interesting maneuvers that happen for whatever reasons. But more important for this podcast is we know this will have an impact on your clients. We know it will have an impact on tax law in the very near future. We know that it'll have an impact on audits in the not so distant future. We know it will impact family offices, and we know it will impact client accounting services. So those seem like um, core services to public practice CPA firms.
But we also know that the existing market players in the financial services businesses, they're going to fight like heck against these new upstarts that threaten to move their cheese. So we want to let you know that this move by the White House really grants the initial legitimacy to these things being used as an exchange of value in our system, even though they've been around for 10, 15 years. They're just now getting to where you can use them without having to worry about, is this going to be seen as a money laundering transaction if I do this?
Yeah, good point, Brian. In fact, just on that item, in other accounting technology labs, we've talked about, payment services, and I'll just call out quick fee or CPA charge or forwardly, which we've discussed in the past. But when you recognize that we have 2.5 to 5 points, but typically about 3.5 points of credit card fees, in the banking facilities right now for MasterCard and Visa, and of course, the competitors of American Express and Discover and Diners. That is a lot of friction in the payment systems. And if you look at wire fees for ACH or wire fees for SWIFT, those are also pretty heavy friction. So, again, we've been watching it for, you know, over a decade. It obviously is pretty heavy news right now. And on the day we're recording this, there's going to be a lot more things that break over the next few weeks. But we wanted to give you a little bit of an update so you had a point of reference from somebody that you're used to listening to on the topic. So,
Uh,
Brian, closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts is that we stand at the precipice of a very interesting time. You and I have both gone to events that have been put on by Zoho, and you may remember when Prime Minister Modi a few years ago withdrew all paper currency notes that had a value greater than about $5 US. And then they moved everybody to push the cash economy into the traditional banking system and require people to do wire transfers and the cost over there where you mentioned 2.5 to 3% loading of fees associated with MasterCard Visa. Over there, money transfers through the banking network, 10 basis points, so 1/10 of 1%. And so this crypto has the opportunity to potentially move us in that direction. And I think it's going to be pretty epic to watch this battle that's about to take place between the upstart crypto people and the PayPal mafia against the traditional banking financial service folks. And I don't know about you, Randy, but I'm buying a case of popcorn at the Costco, and we're gonna watch this. It's gonna be a battle royale, and who knows where it's gonna go. But I think you're gonna see. I think it's gonna be important for you to watch how the key congressional leaders come out on this because they have to, especially the Congress has to run every 2 years for re-election, so we need to keep our eyes on this. Very interesting time we live in, though.
A very interesting time. And friends, you know now why we wanted to do a quick update here on this new cryptocurrency executive order, which establishes a strategic reserve, because this is a big deal, I think. And we'll see how it all plays out. But this is kind of the, well, I guess I'll call it continuing, but primary opening salvo. So we appreciate you listening in today. We'll talk to you again soon in another technology accounting lab. Good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.